The cat jumped up and nipped at my fingers, drawing my attention. Then it bounded up to the front of a nearby house with a small, sloping backyard. When I figured out what it wanted from me, I felt like an idiot for not thinking of it myself earlier. I caught up with the feline, sprinting over to the door in a couple of steps, nearly tripping over myself in the process. Luckily for me, most houses aren't locked in the Otherworld. Theoretically, I could wander into any house I wanted. I preferred not to, because that felt like a pretty big invasion of privacy, but I had tried it a couple times out of curiosity. I ran inside and slammed the door, panting wildly. I was standing in a dim hallway decorated with patterned, slightly old-fashioned wallpaper. A pair of nearby doors stood opposite one another, each hanging open to reveal colorful, curtained rooms adorned with toys, drawers and beds covered by spaceship and planet-adorned blankets. I paused to lock the front door, then ran over to the nearest window to peer out into the darkness. When I didn't see the spider, I checked another window and then another. Was it searching for a way inside the house? I wondered. With its size, I couldn't imagine it could fit itself in, even if it managed to somehow break the door down. I couldn't see the spider. However, the horrors weren't over yet. The ability to astrally project isn't the only power I possess while I'm inside Otherworld. I developed some even more disturbing abilities during my time here. For instance, I know how to move into the minds of creatures and sometimes even more human inhabitants of the Otherworld. It's as if I can psychically invade their thoughts, though sometimes they are the ones invading mine. Like astral projection, the power is far from easy to control. I began to feel like the spider was right beside me, a squirming, insectal mass probing at the edges of my mind. Here and there a half-comprehensible thought or feeling briefly manifested at the fringes of my consciousness. This quickly turned maddening. My awareness was split between two people. One was me, and the other was an unspeakable being, consumed by a deep, primordial hunger and a sense of predatory desire. With the invasive consciousness came recollections of eating and chewing ferociously on tough flesh and brittle bone, tasting things so foul they left me retching uncontrollably, alongside memories of hours being spent stalking and collecting prey. I discovered a spot to curl up in the corner of one of the bedrooms, near a window that looked out on the web-coated neighborhood. Periodically, I heard the shifts and groans on the roof or skittering and pattering across the walls that told me the spider was still trying to seek me out. In my mind, the sense of hunger became aggravated by a growing feeling of impatience and frustration. At least I was managing to keep my own presence hidden from it. It knew I was in its head, though not where, and its mind was perhaps the largest mind I'd ever sensed. Though that fact could change in seconds with a single short lapse in my focus. The one thing which got me through the mental anguish of those minutes was the cat. A soft and warm bundle of fur climbed up onto my knees and pawed at my face for attention until I opened my eyes and began stroking him and alternately scratching him behind the ears. We would survive the night together, one way or another. I just prayed we could both get out of there in one piece. Extracting myself out of the spider's mind was like getting the cat out of the web. Slow and painstakingly difficult yet manageable. The spider's mind was immense but lacking in the speed and grace of its body, and the cat helped keep me calm enough to focus. I created an imaginary room for myself the way my mum taught me and locked myself inside of it, away from the spider's probing mind. The longer we spent separated, the further off its presence felt, and soon enough, it was difficult for me to sense its mind at all. I didn't hear or feel any sign of the spider after that. But every now and again I saw the cat's ears pick up and he gave a low hiss, which was enough to let me know it wasn't safe to go outside. I may have managed to protect my mind from its invasive psychic presence, but that didn't mean it had physically gone anywhere. there was only one way I was going to escape the situation alive. Dying in the other world wouldn't kill me in real life. Rather, I'd learned by then it could lead to something worse than death. Once I felt like I'd relaxed enough, I crawled under the queen-sized bed inside of the room I'd snuck into, shuffled as far toward the back as I could, and closed my eyes. I didn't feel like sleeping, but I knew I had to try. It was the only way out there. Sleeping, or sinking into a meditative trance, is how you enter the other world, and it's also how you leave it. I figured I would eventually fall asleep if I lay there for long enough. At least, I had to hope so. Every little noise jolted my eyes wide open and broke my heart out into a panicked, fluttering rhythm. I felt too vulnerable and exposed to relax. I was too restless, and found myself on my feet again after a couple more minutes of hiding. I discovered the basement by accident whilst pacing the house to try to walk off my excess energy. It seemed like a better place to stay since it put a little more distance between me and the spider, so I migrated there, curling up against a dresser with my feet pulled up to my knees, cushioned by an old, scratchy blanket I discovered nearby. The cat came over to me and cuddled up beside me. I felt his fur against my face, brushing my cheek and nose, and I heard his purring against my ear. I pulled him close to myself, so that I could feel the vibrations of his breathing against my chest. I can't say how long it took me to get to sleep, but I did. From there I drifted back into normal dreams which quickly faded from my memory, and finally, I woke up, for real, this time. Back in the safety of my house and my normal bedroom, my session of astral projecting was over. The next time 3 nights later when I woke up again in the other world, I looked around half hoping to see the cat curled up beside me where he'd been when I went to sleep inside the basement. When I realized I was alone, I wanted to cry. I very nearly did. My short-lived feline friend had been great, but it also served to remind me exactly how alone I was in this cold, dead world. I sat on my bed for a while, despondent. Eventually, I wandered downstairs to face the quiet, gentle glow of a non-existent sun. It was daytime in the other world, though daytime looked like a perpetual sunset, so it was still gloomy. The cat practically scared me to death when he pounced on me 10 minutes later as I was meandering listlessly along the footpath outside my house. I gave a shriek as something leapt into my arms, nearly knocking me off my feet. I struggled to get a hold of it, but it was too fast and nimble, and it kept slipping free from my grip. Then I started laughing as it smothered my face in warm, rough licks. I felt soft fur against my hands and a fluffy tail tickling my hair and shoulders. I carefully pulled the cat away from my face and stared into its mismatched eyes. "You found me," I said, wonderingly. The cat blinked and licked its lips, then gave a long and lingering mew. From that day on, the cat was my loyal friend, a friend who followed me, or had me follow him, during my nighttime trips through the other world. Not all the trips, admittedly. Sometimes he would disappear on other adventures without me, but enough of them. For the first time ever, in this lonely liminal world, I had a friend. He was a reminder that things weren't all so awful around here. Having someone there beside you, even if it is a mysterious spirit cat, is a lot better than wandering the alien landscapes alone. Even when you've gotten used to being alone for so long like I had, the quiet companionship of the cat made the other world seem almost like a different place entirely. "What should I call you?" I asked as I looked down at the cat contemplatively. In the days following my last visit to the other world, a little Googling had allowed me to identify the breed of the cat as a Kalmani. It was a pretty good match except for the unusually large paws, ears, and eyes, and as I would later come to find, my cat's tendency to float in the air sometimes. The creature stared up at me unblinkingly, offering absolutely no suggestions. I tried out a couple of names. Charlie, Ash, Nugget, Sage, Larry, Caspian, Windsor, Solomon. None of them seemed right for him. More names popped up in my mind. I dismissed each one of them as quickly as the first. One of my friends once had a cat named Snowflake, and that had me thinking up more random and unusual ideas. Bubbles? I asked. I remembered always wanting to have a fish named Bubbles when I was younger, but my aunt and uncle were never fond of pets. The cat winked. Bubbles? I repeated the word a couple of times. It wasn't any sensible name for any cat really, but I liked it anyway. Though I honestly couldn't tell if the cat did. Well, why not? I asked. I felt like it kinda suited him. Bubbles responded by bounding a couple steps ahead of me and glancing behind him with wide eyes. The implication was clear. That night, we set off on the first of countless journeys out into the depths of the Otherworld. The next few hours I spent following my newly named cat through different parts of the Otherworld to whatever places Bubbles deemed worthy of my attention. Whenever I got tired, he meowed and pawed at me to keep following him. That was one of Bubbles' favorite things to do with me, to show me things or places and observe my reaction to them. One time some weeks after our first meeting, he had me following him for more than an hour so he could retrieve a small bowl of yarn. Once we'd reached it, he awkwardly picked it up in his mouth and walked it over to me. Then he stared up at me until I took it from him with a sigh. Bubbles wanted me to play with him. He'd actually made me walk for over an hour through nowhere just for this freaking ball of yarn. I never knew if he was going to take me to see something insignificant and stupid or something strange and beautiful. A different time he took me to a garden filled with just about every kind of rose and flower I could imagine arranged chaotically alongside a long pathway reaching up to a cluttered, overgrown hoarder's house. He proceeded to run through the flowers, tearing up pieces of the garden and getting himself totally covered in dirt, flower petals and grass. Another time the cat took me on a journey with him to a mossy, old-looking house with hundreds of wind chimes and various charms hanging off of strings from every possible surface. They were playing a soft, slightly sad melody alongside the gentle breeze brushing against my face. Standing on the porch and all over the garden were about as many miniature fairy statues and garden gnomes. An overgrown-looking water fountain sat in the middle of it all, covered in moss and lilies. I could swear I saw the gnomes moving out of the periphery of my vision. It was one of those uncanny places I was sure didn't exist in the real world, rather randomly turning up in the other world the same way the spiderweb had. I tried to open the large, oaken door and was disappointed to find it was locked. It was unusual because, like I said earlier, doors to houses in the other world tended to be unlocked most of the time. Instead, I tried using the large, decorated knocker to bang on the door a couple of times and apprehensively awaited a response. I thought I heard some feminine whispers and possibly a giggle coming from the other side, but no one ever answered the door and the quiet quickly returned. Occasionally, I shared with Bubbles things I'd found, too, though they were usually not noteworthy, and to be honest, Bubbles really seemed interested unless I'd found him something to play with or chase around. After a long night of exploring, we would sit together for a while staring out at the desolate city. We both had our favorite positions up on a large oak tree in my backyard. Bubbles perched himself delicately on a thin, horizontal branch and I sat with my knees drawn up to my chest on one of the tree's larger limbs, leaning against the trunk, right above the swing I'd once built off of it when I was younger. In many ways, Bubbles acted like any regular cat would. He brought me presents in the form of the carcasses of some small creatures, including fish, mice, and insects. Some species were familiar to me, others I'd never seen before. At least a couple of them looked quite terrifying. He would also play small pranks on me. Not infrequently he would sneak up on me and pounce on top of me, biting me or turbo slapping me with his paws before jumping off of me. He'd scared me half to death more than once this way. There were also some uncat-like behaviors I noticed from Bubbles. He yelled and caterwauled at the moon for hours, mimicking the noises of what sounded like wolves in the distance. Sometimes they would join in alongside him instead. It left me to wonder if there were more creatures like Bubbles out there. There were times where Bubbles acted far more intelligently than any cat should. For instance, he possessed an uncanny ability to find me whenever I was feeling miserable or sad, and I could swear he understood a lot of what I said to him during our one-sided conversations. Bubbles was a very special cat, there was no denying it. Whoever he was, I loved him. He was the perfect companion for my lonely nighttime journeys. Things in the dreamscape were very different with the cat around, though I had no way of knowing how much Bubbles would go on to change my life over the course of the following years. Writer Kara's creepypasta.org